Hello. I wanted to take a minute today to talk a little bit about what most faculty are thinking about in today's current health crisis. That is, how do you take what you do in a physical face-to-face classroom and how do you put it into a mode so that your students can still get the content they need while not having to come onto campus. So a lot of times people think right away that we're just going to switch to online. And as an online instructor, I think, yeah, online classes are fantastic for this purpose because we actually have created these courses where students don't have to come onto campus to get everything they need. But these courses take a ton of time to put together. I'd say easily 120 hours because you start creating an online course just by starting at the course outcomes and you build the course upwards and you create this whole process where you're guiding the students from start to finish on this educational journey. And they do all kinds of things in the online classroom to engage with content, the instructor, the other students. And you have to plan it out in such a way that you get through everything that you need to do in a way that's going to lead to student success by the end of the course. Now, if you have a face-to-face class and you can't meet on campus anymore, you're suddenly trying to figure out what to do. So I wanted to take a minute today to help you brainstorm some tools that you can do to make this transition for a virtual classroom as easy as possible, a non-face-to-face class, some techniques and some tools that you might want to consider based on what you do in your classroom. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is that you know your students better than anyone else. Most of the students that we have who come to our face-to-face classrooms, they're there because they want to be in the classroom setting. So changing things up super wildly might cause them a lot of stress, and it might make them a little bit more challenging to reach in a different medium. So when you think about your classroom, think about what you can do to try to keep it as close to your current course as possible, because you don't know. Maybe you'll only be out of the classroom for a few weeks, or maybe it will be a longer time. But trying to keep that in mind to make it as similar to the current course as possible. So when you start thinking about how you offer your class, think about what you do. If you're someone who does lectures, oops, let's get a pen that works. If you're someone who does lots of lectures, think about the types of lectures that you do. Do you do things that are PowerPoints? Or things that have slides? If so, trying to just transition to have your lectures in real time, so synchronous online lectures is a possibility. The students will be able to see you, they'll be able to hear you, they can ask questions via the chat or even using microphones and video if they would like. Tools that you might think about using, Blackboard Collaborate. Is one option. WebEx is another. These are the tools that we have at our college. If you're not as part of my college, you might think about Zoom is another one, a free tool that's being used that allows for web conferencing. These tools can be used. You can upload your slides into that. You can have your video turned on. You can lecture. The students can hear you, and it would be just like you were if you were in your classroom. Each of these tools is a little bit different, but they will allow you to do this. Okay, you can also use these 3 tools for your office hours as well. Other tools, I'll just kind of list this down. So you can use those tools, but then you can use things like Google Hangouts and Skype also work well. So I just kind of want to add those as 2 additional ones. Now, if you're someone who lectures where you do a lot of whiteboards or chalk talks, you might find that some of these tools allow you to do it if you're really good at drawing on the screen, but it might not be a very good possibility. So you might want to look at things that you can do on a smart device, where you can do some screen capturing. Now these will likely end up being things that you might need to record at a different time, but you should upload them so that the students can watch them at the same time that they would have during the class. Now anytime you're trying to do lectures or these screen captures, you'll want to try to keep your content as condensed as possible. So really try to tighten it down, because if a student is watching it later on, if it's not live and they're watching it later, students tend to lose interest, and not even students, people in general start to lose interest about 6 minutes or less after a video has started. So you want to get all that information in there as quickly as possible. All right, now what if you're somebody who does lots of discussions in class? Okay, so if you're a big discussions person, or maybe that's just one of the aspects of your class, you can think about it. You can do a live discussion using those tools that we already talked about. So you might have a short lecture and then you open it up for discussion, and then I think about, offer the questions before the students come in so they can think about it a little bit beforehand, and then you can have that discussion in real time using those tools like WebEx and Blackboard Collaborate. Or if not, you can look at the discussion tools that you have in your learning management system. So if you're in Blackboard, you can just have discussion forums. Okay, or if you're D2L or whatever tool you're using, you would just use those discussion forums. Now, when you're going to create an online discussion, you have to think about what you do in a classroom setting to make it really work. You provide them instructions, questions, but you're also going to be needing to look at what type of responses you want from the students. So you'll have to write out some expectations, what you're going to look for to evaluate their participation. You're going to want to make sure that it's pretty obvious to the students what you're going to be looking at, and some basic, what are those expectations? How many times do they need to post? How frequently? Do they need to log in over a period of an hour on a specific day? Do they need to log in on multiple days? Put all of that into your instructions so that they can follow it. Okay, if you do assignments in class, so these, I'm not really thinking of these as like your big assessments, not necessarily quizzes and tests, but if you're somebody who likes to lecture and then you give out a handout during class that you want the students to complete, or there's an activity, if you can bring it into those synchronous live sessions that you're doing, just think about it ahead of time. Say, today I'm going to be lecturing about, let's say, volcanoes. I'm a geologist. And then I might have an activity where I want the students to look at some topographic maps of different types of volcanoes and figure out what they are. I would try to plan to email out that assignment beforehand, or to post it in the LMS so they can download it before the class begins. And then that way they would have it physically with them when you're going over it face to face. Now, students can also submit things through your LMS, so if that's something that's new to you, just remember that a lot of this stuff, they can download it and then they can submit it back for grading if it needs to be graded, all through that learning management system. Now, assessments, I can't even spell today. Things like quizzes, papers, exams. These are all things that you're going to want to think about for your new class. If you do weekly quizzes or daily lectures with quizzes, you want to add those in, but come up with specific times and communicate all that information as much as you can with your students so they know what's expected, when they have to do it, and what the due date is. And then plan for things not to work. Are you going to offer students to make it up? And then kind of get that in ahead. Now, if you're in a writing class where you might have papers or peer-to-peer assignments, keep in mind that these activities do work online, but with students who are really used to sitting in a classroom right next to each other, you're going to have to provide them some instruction with how it's going to work, what the expectations are, and then come up with plans for kind of problem solving should you need to. So I've done peer-to-peer review for papers in my classes, and usually what I do is I have the students submit the papers, I download them, and then I say, okay, I decide who's going to peer pair up how they're going to do those peer reviews, and then you can email those papers to the different students so that they can be peer reviewed. You can also do peer-to-peer reviews in discussion forums if you have small snippets of things that you want them to review. I've had students peer observe lectures that they've given, they've recorded them and posted it into discussion forums, and then they evaluate each other. So I'll have them use the rubric for the class, and then they make those evaluations. They give each other feedback, those fantastic feedback sandwiches and whatnot. So those are just a couple things that you might be thinking about for taking your face-to-face class and trying to put it into this new non-touching virtual classroom setting. I hope this is a helpful place to get started. Dive into it, go slowly, don't plan to do everything at all. Just start out with the basics, figure out what's the most important aspect of your face-to-face class, and then find the best tools that will make it possible for you to make it go up for your students in this period of kind of uncertainty. I wish you luck.